All right. Here's part two, the causes of anxiety. Causes and avoidance is what I got. All right. So just as a brief summary, in the last video, we talked about why you should be anxious because the world's wild. And so it's totally a justifiable reaction. However, it can go overboard where you can no longer cope with the present and function. It's anxiety is a part of your threat detection system, your fight or flight system. And whereas fear is a response to immediate threat, anxiety is this general uncertainty or worry about the vague future. And I think that's it. So now we'll go into causes. From a mythological perspective, again with Jordan Peterson, anxiety occurs because the outside world is just too much to handle, right? It's harsh, it's judgmental, it's unpredictable. We don't feel capable of dealing with it. It reminds us of how incompetent we are, how low we are in the dominance/competence and sexual hierarchies. And it makes us feel like shit and makes us nervous. Beyond that, there's always numerous roots or causes, partial causes of these kinds of disorders. Genetics can play a role. Personality, as I mentioned, females tend to score higher in trait neuroticism, and that plays a role. Brain biochemistry, environmental factors, childhood trauma, stimulant use like coffee, all can play a role and all intermingle, right? So the important thing to note, though, or at least my approach to it, is that there are obviously biological components to this, and a lot of times what is psychological is first biological. But if we only look through the lens of biology as like a neurochemical imbalance, then we trivialize the actual human experience that this issue presents. So to me, I like to focus less about the chemical imbalances and more about the imbalances in the way we live. And imbalances in the way we live do affect our chemical imbalances as well. One of the big causes of, or one of the issues that has led to a lot of anxiety and depression in the modern individual is the fact that people are very lonely. Despite like all the social media and the internet, people are very lonely. We have disbanded our tribes. We have gotten rid of the communities a lot of times, and it's making people feel awful. In addition, modern society imparts into us junk values. Just like junk food doesn't fulfill us nutritionally, junk values don't fulfill us psychologically. We live in a system that's designed to get us to neglect what is important in life, and it's costing us, right? Things like family, things like human connections, things like love and kindness and compassion. Everything has become a bit more transactional, a bit soulless, let's say, and it's costing us, even though maybe our standards of living are higher on average than ever before. People are mentally and emotionally and spiritually and physically drained and unhealthy. And lastly, I just want to say that whatever the specific causes of your anxiety, you're not a malfunctioning machine. You're human, and your anxiety is a signal that you have unmet needs. And just to keep in mind Uncle Jay's advice of treating yourself as someone you're responsible for helping. That includes befriending yourself. That includes being gentle with your shortcomings, as nobody's perfect, and forgiving yourself if necessary, which is often necessary. Next, we'll get into anxiety that's rooted in childhood trauma, and this is mostly from Gabor Mate. So, according to him, One of the main, and this is very similar to what I wrote about regarding addiction and our attachment theory. So when we're children, attachment is one of our main priorities because without a caretaker taking care of us, we die when we're young as baby mammals. So one of the main circuits we have as children is basically panic and anxiety, because when we're upset as a child, when our needs aren't being met, we get our panic circuit gets activated, and then we cry for help. And this is necessary because when we cry, our caretakers pay attention and they come take care of us. And in a perfect world, that's what they do. But sometimes our parents or our caretakers are stressed, they're distracted, they have issues of their own, and so they don't respond to our cries and they don't comfort us. And when a child is repeatedly not cared for, they internalize this panic. And that's how we end up with a lot of anxious people. It's become a conditioned response, and their bodies have gotten used to basically always panicking. And one of the reasons that parents adopt this mindset is that, you don't want to hug the baby too much, right? And coddle the baby because they'll be weak, so you want to make them tough. And this idea that is if you're always picking up your child when they cry, then they'll just do it for the rest of their lives. And there's some truth in that because there is a fine line of, hugging your child too little and hugging your child and being overprotective. And so parents try to control the behavior. But what we need to understand is that when you pick up your child when they have physical or emotional distress, you're teaching them that the world is safe. And like I talked about before, when it comes to healing, all roads lead to safety. And the thing is that, like, children don't remain helpless forever unless the parents, again, either hug them too little or too much. Even in nature, like the mother bear at some point disappears, and the child needs to grow up and take care of themselves in a mature, confident way. So we might think we do, but we don't have to force kids to be independent because independence is nature's agenda. And again, meeting the needs of the child without being overprotective is one of the many challenges of parenthood. But when parents are able to strike that balance, children can mature out of that helpless state with a healthy sense of self-regulation and calm confidence in their own capacity. But when we don't pick kids up enough and we leave them alone, we teach them that the world is unsafe and that they're helpless. And that's how we end up with anxious children. So avoidance as a coping mechanism. One of the loops that people use is avoidance when it comes to anxiety. And this can mean they withdraw from the situations, social isolation, substance abuse, and in some cases they will commit suicide. Avoiding the trigger makes anxiety worse over time based on this cycle. And this is very similar to what I talk about in the fundamental framework about treating problems as opportunities and the game of life being either searching out solutions or distractions. And avoidance is a form of distraction. So the cycle is pretty similar, is pretty simple. Starts out with whatever is the trigger that makes us feel anxious. And then we experience physical symptoms and we distract ourselves to not feel these things. Sometimes that means drinking, sometimes that means avoiding the situation, whatever it is. And when we do that, we temporarily get rid of the symptoms, get a short-term relief. However, there's almost always costs associated with avoidance. For example, with drug use, there's issues with tolerance, with withdrawal, with addiction. There's financial costs, relationship costs, health costs, etc. and we stay stuck in the same situation. When we avoid, we don't actually get rid of the anxiety, we just put it off, right? And so then when we continue to do this, eventually the anxiety gets worse because we get more and more conditioned. This becomes a habit, this cycle of avoidance, and it becomes unconscious. We distract ourselves as just the default action, and it becomes harder and harder to actually overcome this anxiety. And this anxiety, again, it doesn't actually go away, so it just stays with you and gets worse. And the only way to break out of this is to face our fears, is to confront the dragon of chaos. I know it's easier said than done, but when we slowly do that, we realize that things are okay. And this is how we ultimately, one of the ways we get out of anxiety is gaining competence in life. So, strategies for healing, I think that is the next one. Yes. So, that's it for this. Thank you for listening. In the third part, I will go into the strategies for healing and preventing anxiety.